Well, greetings friends and welcome back, and apologies that it's been so long since the last video, but I, like you, have probably had a couple of things on. Anyway, today we're looking at the Diamondback Scout, the little version of the Diamondback Explorer. Let's go and jump in. Okay, so we're standing on the deck in front of the Diamondback Scout, and this ship always gives me the impression of like a chicken about to lay an egg or something, with these downturned engines and the landing gear, which really do look like chicken's feet. That's really what it always feels like. Essentially, the size is similar widthways, not exactly the same, but widthways to the Diamondback Explorer. It's just that it's kind of been shrunk and shortened for the purposes of this ship. And for those of you who have played No Man's Sky, this ship kind of feels a little bit like one of the large longships in No Man's Sky in terms of its kind of size, which is a little bit bizarre, but there you go. Walking around to the rear side now, looking at the engines. The engines are quite wide. I would say probably the nozzle of them is about 2 meters in diameter, and obviously it sinks quite a fair bit in. If you imagine the jets on the back of a fighter jet, a modern day fighter jet, but scaled up to, probably 10 times their actual size in real life, that's probably what you're kind of looking at. One thing I noticed as well is that there's some janky textures down here. You can see that the Zone 3 bit is actually floating off the deck. It won't let me show you, but hopefully you can see when I move across that it's actually not really connected to the deck itself, which is a little bizarre. In front of, in between the two engines there, you can see the little hatch, which would probably be your entrance and exit, and we'll have a bit more of a look at that from the interior. Now I'm going to start somewhere different today because I've just noticed this blue writing in some detail above the commander headless, looking all headless as normal, and it says drive unit systems diagnosed. You know what, you can just pause and read that if you like, but it's certainly very easily readable and, probably, I don't know, a finger width wide in terms of the text itself. Up here there are two good sized grab handles, one there and one there, for moving around in 0G, and then that's kind of it. The one thing I really do like about this ship, along with the Diamondback Explorer and some of the others, are the wires, snaking in through behind bits of metal, and I think that looks really awesome. It looks a bit jerry-rigged. It looks like the commanders had to come up here and do some repairs as well. I really, really like those sort of details. It looks lived in and, well, kind of natural for what I would imagine would be the case for someone who has to live in space for a very long time and fly about and do repairs on the go. Down in front, the dashboard is very similar to the ASP range. In this case, it has kind of been squished horizontally and stretched vertically, or in fact, probably vertically. It's kind of the same as the ASPs, but it has definitely been squished horizontally such that it would obviously fit into this ship, which also means that everything is kind of a little bit rhomboid. You can see even the rivets there are an oval rather than a circle, as well as these ones here. So it's clearly just exactly the same model, just been squished, which, is unfortunately a little bit lazy, but there you go. It is attached by those two big clamps there, and you can see some wires hanging out from underneath the dashboard there, which again looks pretty cool and looks like the commanders had to fix something at some point. Down there is your standard 1.5 foot odd wide, or long I should say, fire extinguisher inside the clamps, and the bottom of the arm that would hold the keyboard. We haven't actually seen a keyboard in one of these videos for a little while, which is pretty cool. And I'll remind you that it is based on the 1980 something, correct year on the screen, BBC Micro, and if you have a look at pictures of the BBC Micro home computer from that era, you will see precisely this keyboard, which is kind of cool. Obviously it harkens back to the days and where David and others were starting in their computer engineering and programming journey, I guess. The other grab handle down here, so if we're standing on the deck and have just stepped off where the chair actually is, this handle is definitely reachable. It's a very thick grab handle, but you could definitely use it for its intended purposes. There is a wire there which seems to have some form of serial number on it, next to another one going into this little conduit here, and heading down into this box which seemingly would do a thing but has no interior, as you can see. Heading back around to the front of the cockpit, you can see the same sort of things we've seen before. And in terms of distances away, here is where it says Jimmy Jr., here is where the chat would live. Then stepping forward, here would be the brackets of the screen. Here is the projection of the Coriolis starport. Here would be the ship itself. And in front here is the box which displays the starport services menu and information. And then beyond that, here is its actual projector. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how far things are from each other. And sitting back in the normal chair, if we were to look at the side panels, they are in fact way far away. You would have to step out of your chair a fair bit in order to touch them. Now moving to the rear of the ship, we see the old generic CRTs that we have seen in all of the Lakon ships previously, with the Core 1, Core 2, and a repeat of that screen just down here, albeit squashed, and the same information that we have seen here, and again the itty bitty little switch. Along with that are two little sliders, which they're smaller than a keyboard key. I'd say probably 60% of a keyboard key. There is also this Lakon Systems panel showing Signature 1, Signature 2 connected into the wall with some stuff and absolutely nothing behind it, as one would expect. The rear grab handle is located right here, definitely large enough to grab with both hands, and then there is the bit of an indent here before the door that we will definitely go through in just a moment. Heading around to the other side, we have another 1.5 foot long fire extinguisher, a very tiny first aid kit. You know what? I reckon that's probably, imagine the size of a sandwich box. It's probably 150% the size of a single regular square bread sandwich. So certainly you wouldn't be able to fit too many medical supplies into that one. Another copy of that Core 1, Core 2 screen, and this panel that we have seen before in various different colors throughout all the Lakon ships. Really, here, most of the lights are well aligned to where the buttons should be, so props for that. The other door is over here, and then obviously the other side indent would be just here. The door says closed while in flight mode and has your open and close buttons, along with a good fat finger sized keypad. Alright, obligatory door noise, and then we step through, and through the rear we can see pretty much the entire interior. Most of it is actually taken up by the hardpoints, which are sitting there below us, and also the insides, I guess, of those engines, which have on them that low res texture that we have seen in previous ships, and that's kind of about it. Now, one thing for you eagle-eyed observers, you'll probably see that there's a couple of things missing, namely the cargo bay and landing gear. Now, this is actually the first ship that we have seen this issue on. Part of that might be down to the intricate way that the side engines operate. You know that when we're landed, the side engines actually tilt down and the landing gear comes out of those, whereas here they're very clearly modeled in their normal straight back and forward position. So part of that might be that issue. We'll find out in a moment. Up there we can obviously see the canopy and a couple of fake lights, which don't actually seem to emanate light. Rather, the texture appears to just have been lightened around the edges as my tracking kills itself in order to simulate lights. So that's cheeky, but obviously that saves on processing power. Now as we select our launch sequence, let's see if there are any changes to the side. We can see the thrusters did initially shoot down the bottom there as they are at an angle, and then they come up to match where the thrusters actually are. So clearly the thrust aspect of this is working, but the model doesn't take into consideration the fact that the engines point down initially and then up again. But now obviously you can see that it lines up. But as you saw, no landing gear and obviously still no cargo bay. Let's go out a bit further and see if we can see the hardpoints deploy. So now that we're far enough from the space station, let's deploy the hardpoints, which previously some of these hardpoint boxes have been see-through, but this one obviously isn't. But you can see that the hardpoint does pop out there. Obviously, in order to be able to shoot, it needs to actually be visible and out there, even in this version where you're looking, you know, from the interior out. And there's the one that's popped out from just underneath where the commander actually sits. You can see it's kind of clipped a little bit into the the space itself. And sticking my head through the floor, you can see that there is just a bit of that little door that hasn't opened up in this version. If we just retract the hard points, you can see that the door doesn't actually slide back as it normally would from the exterior view. So this door opens in order to allow the hard point out, but that does not happen in this view. So if we just deploy the hard point again, you can see it, and out it pops, glitches through that door there. Now, of course, you know what this means. This means I have to do a bit of crawling. So here is the commander's chair sitting on the immovable plinth as per normal. If we stick our head directly below it, we can see the underside of that deck and a little bit of space, but no texture underneath the seat itself. And then if we look through even further, you can see the two hard points, which are kind of sitting there, but a little bit glitched into each other. In this one, you can see the interior is see-through, so you can actually see the interior workings of that particular hard point. If we retract it again, it should slide back on those rails. There we are. So clearly these two hard points are absolutely back to back, touching each other underneath where the commander sits, and just deploy sideways out. So that's kind of interesting to see the scale of how far they come into each other. So now we find ourselves underneath the Diamondback Scout itself. We can see there the hatch for the cargo bay and what would appear to be a hatch for the landing gear. If we firstly open up the cargo scoop, you can see that there is certainly a cargo bay underneath, and it probably takes up the majority of the interior space at the rear of the Diamondback Scout. We'll retract that again, and deploying the landing gear, we should see them pop out in conjunction with the side ones deploying, and indeed they are the regular, asp or Lacon fist that we have seen in the other Diamondbacks and asps. So that part is not at all different, and you can also see that obviously these side wings did come down into the squatting egg-laying position as well, but it's just not something that you see from the interior. Now ordinarily I would end this kind of video roughly here, but given that we haven't seen the landing gear in this ship, I'm going to do an experiment. Back to the starport. And the experiment is as follows. We are currently in the Anaconda. There's obviously a very separate and quite popular video about this particular ship, but in that video you know that we can see the landing gear and various things through the bottom. So let's stick our face through it and see what actually happens. And lo and behold, the landing gear is gone. So clearly what Frontier have done in a recent update is removed the interior vision of the landing gear. And obviously I understand why, because as we've seen in my previous videos, the landing gear clips through the interior when it is deployed and retracted. And also you can see that whilst the fighter bay is certainly rendered, the cargo bay is nowhere to be seen. So obviously the cargo bay was causing a render issue for some reason for Frontier as well, and they have chosen to remove it along with the landing gear. So from that we can draw a couple of different conclusions, one of which being that they are starting to prepare the interiors of these ships for whatever they are choosing to do on Odyssey, and how they will actually do spacelegs. You can see that much else hasn't changed. Like you can actually see in the front of the Anaconda there's still that black shield that we saw in the Anaconda video, although you can still stick your head through it, there is that shield there. So they haven't changed a great deal, but obviously they've removed the landing gear because they clip through the cockpits. We have seen that on many videos before, and for whatever reason they've gotten rid of the cargo bay. Obviously it was causing them some issues as well. Really, that's a bit of a shame, because one of the things that I really found for these videos, apart from these last ones, is that we've been able to see exactly where the cargo bay is, and it's helped us to really get the sense of scale of the interior and where things lie from the interior compared to the exterior. So that being gone is a shame, but obviously it's because they are preparing for Odyssey and spacelegs themselves. So thank you for joining me once again for this video on the Diamondback Scout, even though we're looking at Anaconda now, and I'll see you in the next one. Fly safe, Commanders.